The alien marketplace was crowded with noise and color. Tall creatures with shining scales bargained for fruit. Machines buzzed in the air carrying goods, and merchants shouted their prices. Yet in the middle of this busy place, one figure sat. Quietly on the ground, she was an alien widow, her clothes torn and faded, her eyes filled with a sadness that seemed endless. Beside her sat two small children, thin and tired, their little hands clinging to her dress. Most people walked past without even looking. Some turned their heads away as if ashamed to see her. Others whispered cruel words about her weakness. The widow did not argue, she only sat with her children, holding them close, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice their pain. Then a human walked by. He was not rich or powerful, just a traveler carrying a small bag. His boots were dusty from long journeys. His face looked tired but kind. He stopped when he saw the widow and her children. For a moment, he simply stood. There watching them, something inside his heart pulled him closer. The widow raised her eyes. When she saw the human, she whispered words that no one expected. Her voice shook as she said, "Adopt my children, human. Take them. Give them a home, and end my loneliness." The human froze. He thought he had misheard. Why would a stranger say such a thing? And in front of everyone, the market grew quieter as nearby aliens turned their heads. Some laughed, some gasped in shock. Others muttered that the widow had lost her mind. But her words were real. Her voice was desperate. Her children's wide eyes looked at the human with silent hope. The human felt his chest tighten. He had come to this world to trade, to buy supplies for his journey, not to become part of anyone's life. Yet now this widow was asking him for something far greater than money. "Why me?" the human asked softly, his voice almost lost in the noise of the market. The widow's hands shook as she touched the heads of her children. "Because no one else will," she whispered. "They see us as nothing. My husband is gone. My family has turned away. We have no home, no food. I cannot raise them alone. You are human. They say humans have strong hearts. Please, I beg you." Her words cut deep. The human felt the eyes of the crowd on him. Some waited to see if he would laugh. Others waited to see if he would walk away. But he did neither. He looked at the children. Their cheeks were hollow, their hair unkempt, but their eyes carried a light of hope and fear at the same time. The human knelt slowly. He asked the children their names. Their voices were soft and trembling, yet honest. They clung tighter to their mother as they spoke. His heart ached as he listened. Still, doubt filled his mind. He was just one man. He had little money, little power. Could he really take care of alien children? Could he shoulder such a heavy responsibility? The widow saw the hesitation in his face. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead to the ground before him, shocking the market. No one had expected her to beg in such a way. "Please, human," she whispered again. "Do not let them starve. Do not let them grow alone in this cruel city. Take them. Protect them. Give them a chance." The human's throat went dry. He had never seen such raw desperation before. He felt something stir inside him, a memory of his own loneliness, a memory of nights spent in silence with no family, no laughter, no warmth. The marketplace seemed to fade away. The noise, the whispers, the cruel laughter, all of it grew distant. There was only the widow, her children, and the heavy choice before him. In that moment, the human realized he could walk away and forget, or he could step into a life that would change not only theirs, but his own as well. He looked at the widow, still bowed on the ground, her voice trembling with the last of her hope, and he felt his heart begin to answer her plea. The human could not forget the widow's words, even after leaving the market. Her trembling voice stayed in his mind. He had tried to ignore it, but the image of her children's hollow faces followed him through every street. At last he turned back. His steps led him to the poor corner of the city, the place where light hardly reached. The widow's home was not a home at all. It was a broken shelter built from scraps of metal and stone. The roof leaked. The walls were cracked, and cold wind passed freely through every gap. Inside, the two children sat on the floor, their knees pulled to their chests, staring at an empty bowl placed between them. The human paused at the doorway. The sight struck him harder than any weapon could. He had seen poverty before on Earth, but this was different. The children were so small, their bones sharp under their thin skin. Their big eyes watched him with a mix of fear and hope. The widow rose quickly when she saw him. She bowed her head, ashamed to show him her life. "This is all I have left," she whispered. "One empty bowl. Sometimes I beg. Sometimes kind strangers give us food. But most of the time, the children go to sleep hungry." Her words were heavy. The human stepped inside, his boots echoing on the bare floor. He picked up the bowl, turned it in his hands, and placed it back down. It was light as air, carrying no trace of food, not even crumbs. His throat tightened. Children did not complain, they did not cry, they only sat quietly, as if silence was their way of surviving. The widow stroked their hair gently. She looked at the human with eyes that begged without words. For a long moment, he said nothing. His mind was a storm. He thought of his own loneliness, his small, rented room back in the human quarters. He had food, but no one to share it with. He had warmth, but no laughter to fill it. And now here, in front of him, were 3 lives that carried only cold and hunger. Finally, he spoke. "Come with me." His voice was steady, but inside he felt uncertain. He led them out of the broken shelter. The widow hesitated at first, afraid of the stares and whispers of others, but she followed, holding her children close. The market was still busy. The human walked straight to a food stall. He pulled out credits from his pocket and ordered more food than he had ever bought. For himself, hot bread, steaming stew, sweet fruits from off-world. The stall owner raised his brows, surprised at the human's generosity. Some aliens whispered again, wondering why a human cared for a widow and her children. The widow's hands shook as the food was placed before them. The children stared, wide-eyed, unable to believe it was real. The human gave them the first piece of bread. The little hands grabbed it quickly but gently. They tore the bread in half and shared it without even being told. Tears welled in the widow's eyes as she watched them eat. She covered her mouth to hold back her sobs. The human sat with them, eating slowly, but his eyes never left the children. With every bite they took, he felt a strange warmth grow inside him, something that told him this was more than kindness. It was the start of something deeper. For the first time in years, laughter came from the widow's side of the table, soft, fragile laughter from children, who had almost forgotten how to smile. The human leaned back, listening, letting the sound wash over him like sunlight after a long winter. Still, he knew the city was watching. He could feel the stares, the suspicion, the judgment. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The empty bowl was behind them, and for one meal, the widow and her children had tasted hope. The human realized that he had stepped across an invisible line. He was no longer just a traveler passing by. He was becoming part of their lives, and deep down, he wondered if he could ever turn back. The night fell over the alien city. The glowing lamps lit the streets in pale colors, but the deeper alleys remained filled with shadows. The human walked with the widow and her 2 children, carrying a small bag of food he had bought for them, to save for later. The children held onto his hands tightly, afraid of losing him in the crowd. The widow whispered nervously, "We should not stay out too long. There are eyes everywhere, not all of them kind." Her words proved true, because as they turned into a narrow alley, dark figures stepped out from the shadows. 4 aliens blocked the path. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Their clothes were ragged, but their voices were sharp. They laughed cruelly as they saw the widow. "Beggar woman," one of them hissed. "Still alive, I see. Didn't we warn you to stay away from the market?" The widow froze, pulling her children close. Her body trembled. She whispered to the human, "They hate me. They say I shame the city by asking for help." The leader of the group sneered, his sharp teeth glinting. "And now you walk with a human. Do you think that will save you, widow? Do you think his pity makes you special?" The children hid behind the human, clutching his coat. The human felt anger rise in his chest. He had seen bullies before on Earth, but this cruelty was worse. These aliens mocked a starving mother and her children as if suffering was entertainment. "Step aside," the human said firmly. His voice echoed through the alley, calm but full of warning. The leader laughed. "Listen to him, the human thinks he has power here. You do not belong, human, this is not your fight." The human stood taller, his hands tightened into fists. "It is my fight," he said, "when you threaten children." The aliens exchanged surprised looks. For a moment they did not move. Then one stepped closer, trying to shove the human, but the human did not fall back. He held his ground, eyes locked with the alien. The widow gasped softly. She had never seen anyone stand for her like this. Everyone else always turned away, pretending not to hear her cries. But this human faced the danger without hesitation. The leader's voice turned cold. "You think you are brave, human, but bravery can get you killed." His hand reached toward the widow as if to drag her away. Before he could touch her, the human moved. His hand caught the alien's wrist and pushed it aside. The strength in the human's grip made the alien stumble back. The other three growled, stepping forward. But the human's glare stopped them for a moment. "I will not let you harm them," the human said. His words were simple, but the weight in them was like stone. The children's eyes shone with awe. They had never seen anyone protect them like this. Their little hands clung tighter. Their fear began to mix with a new feeling, hope. The alley grew tense. For a moment it seemed like a fight would break out. The aliens circled, testing the human's courage, but the firmness in his stance made them hesitate. Finally, with a snarl, the leader spat on the ground. "You will regret this, human. You cannot protect them forever." They melted back into the shadows, their laughter fading into the night. The widow collapsed to her knees, her breath shaky. She looked up at the human with tears running down her face. You defended us. No one has ever done that." The human bent down, helping her stand. "No one should hurt you or your children," he said softly. "Not while I am here." The children hugged him suddenly, pressing their small faces against his side. The human froze for a second, then slowly placed his arms around them. It felt strange but warm. It felt like something he had been missing for years. The widow wiped her tears, staring at him with a mixture of fear and wonder. She knew the bullies would not give up so easily. By helping her, the human had placed himself in danger. Yet for the first time in many years, her heart whispered that maybe she was not alone anymore. As they left the alley, the city lights flickered above them. The human glanced back once, knowing the shadows would return, but deep inside he had already made a silent promise. He would not let those shadows take the widow or her children, no matter the cost. The human could not sleep that night. He sat in the small room he had rented in the alien city, staring at the dim light on the wall. His mind was heavy. His heart was restless. The widow's plea echoed again and again. "Adopt. My children, human, end my loneliness." He rubbed his face with his hands, trying to calm the storm inside him. He had always lived a simple life, moving from one place to another, never staying long enough to build roots, never allowing himself to be tied to anyone. That freedom had been his shield, his way of surviving in a galaxy that often saw humans as weak outsiders, but now everything was changing. The moment he saw the empty bowl, the starving children, and the tears in the widow's eyes, something inside him had broken open. He felt a pull stronger than reason, a connection he could not explain. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Could he really do this? Could he raise alien children in a world that barely accepted him? He thought of the bullies in the alley, the cruel words, the stares from strangers in the market. If he became their guardian, the widow and her children would face even more danger. He would be marked, watched, maybe even hunted. He sighed deeply. His hand went to his pocket. He pulled out a small photo, worn and faded. It was of his own family back on Earth. Parents long gone, siblings who no longer spoke to him, a life left behind. He traced the edges with his finger, remembering the warmth of home, the sound of laughter, the meals shared together. He realized then that he had been running from loneliness for years, covering it with travel and work, pretending he needed no one. But the truth was clear now. He was as empty as that bowl he had seen. The next morning he met the widow and her children again. They were waiting at the edge of the market, their eyes bright but uncertain. The children smiled shyly when they saw him. The widow bowed her head, her face still carrying shame but also a spark of fragile hope. He sat with them on a bench, his voice heavy. "I need to be honest with you," he said. "I am only one man. I don't have much money. I don't have a big house. Taking care of children is not easy. And if I stand with you, the city will turn against me too." The widow's lips trembled, but she lifted her head. "I know," she whispered. "I know the risk, but I have no one else. My children need someone strong, someone who will not walk away. You are the only one who even looked at us with kindness." The children leaned against him, as if their small bodies already trusted his presence more than words. Their eyes shone with silent questions. "Will you stay? Will you protect us? Will you be ours?" The human's chest tightened. He looked at their faces, their innocent trust, and he felt the weight of choice pressing down harder than any battle. He could walk away, leave them to fate, pretend he had never heard the widow's plea, or he could step into a storm that would change all of their lives forever. He closed, his eyes, his heart pounding. For the first time in years, he was afraid. Not of death, not of danger, but of failing them, of not being enough. When he opened his eyes again, the widow was watching him, her hands clutched tightly together, her eyes shimmering with tears she tried to hold back. She whispered softly, "Please, human. Even if you cannot promise forever, at least give them today. Give them one day without hunger, one day without fear." The human exhaled slowly. His decision was not complete, but something in him had shifted. He reached out and placed a hand on the widow's shoulder, firm and steady. "I cannot promise the future," he said, "but I will not abandon you now." The widow bowed her head, her tears finally falling. The children hugged him tightly, their small arms wrapping around his waist. In that moment, the human knew that his dilemma had only just begun, but his heart had already chosen its path. The morning sun rose over the city, casting a pale light across the broken streets. The human walked with the widow and her two children toward the quieter part of the market. His bag carried a little food, not much, but enough to share. The children walked close to him, one holding his hand, the other clutching his sleeve. For the first time, the human really looked into their eyes. They were not like other children. Their eyes carried a story far older than their years. Hunger had carved deep shadows under them. Loneliness had filled them with silence, and yet there was something more. A light that had not been broken. When the younger child looked up at him, the human saw a question there, unspoken but heavy. "Will you leave us too?" That gaze struck him harder than any weapon. It was not a demand, not even a plea. It was a fragile hope, trembling between trust and fear. The older child, though quiet, stared at him with a sharper gaze, as if testing him, measuring if this strange human was truly different from the others who had walked past them. That steady look made the human's heart ache. It was the gaze of someone who had already suffered too much, someone who had learned not to expect kindness. The widow walked silently at his side, her face hidden by her hood, but her eyes kept glancing toward him. She did not speak, but her every glance carried gratitude and fear. She knew that even one human's kindness could change her children's world, yet she also feared it could be taken away as quickly as it had come. They sat at a small stall to share breakfast. The human broke the bread and handed it to the children. They did not grab or fight. Instead, they split it carefully, one giving the larger piece to the other. The human froze at the sight. He had expected them to fight over food, but instead they showed each other more care than most adults he had. His throat tightened. He thought of his own childhood, the times he and his siblings had quarreled over the last slice of bread. But these children, with so little, gave first before taking. Their eyes met his again, filled with innocence and strength at the same time. The younger one whispered, "Thank you." In a trembling voice, the human's chest grew warm. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Other aliens in the market stared, some sneered, whispering cruel things. "The human is foolish," one said. "Why waste food on beggar children?" Another laughed. He will regret it soon. Their words burned in the human's ears, but when he looked back at the children, their small smiles made the noise fade away. After the meal, the children followed him as if he were already theirs. They walked with light steps, their eyes brighter than before. The human felt a strange weight in his heart, not heavy like sorrow, but heavy like responsibility, like something precious had been placed in his care. Later that day, as they returned to the widow's shelter, the human paused at the door. He looked again into the children's eyes. He saw the hunger for more than food. They hungered for safety, for love, for a place to belong. He realized then that no promise of wealth, no words of comfort could mean more than his actions. The way they looked at him told him one truth. He was already part of their world. Whether he admitted it or not, their eyes had chosen him. The widow noticed his silence. She touched his arm gently and whispered, "They see you as their father already." Her voice shook, but there was no doubt in her words. The human swallowed, hard. His heart pounded. He knew this was no longer just about feeding them for a day. It was about the days to come, about standing against the world if needed, about answering the silent questions carried in those innocent eyes. He bent down, brushing a hand across the younger child's hair. Their eyes lit up with a joy so pure it almost broke him. The older child finally allowed a small smile, though faint and careful. It was a smile of trust slowly being born. The human stood again, staring at the broken shelter around them, and he knew his choice was no longer just a thought. The children's eyes had already given him his answer. The human had eaten many meals alone in his life, in quiet rooms, in noisy stations, on long journeys across the stars. He had always sat by himself, food nothing more than fuel, but this time was different. This time, as he set the food on a small wooden table inside the widow's shelter, he was not alone. The widow sat on one side, her children beside her. Their eyes were wide, watching every movement. The smell of warm stew filled the air. Soft bread lay in a basket, and fruits glistened in a small bowl. The children leaned forward, their little hands twitching as if afraid the food might vanish before they could taste it. The human smiled gently and pushed the bowls toward them. "Eat," he said softly. The children looked to their mother first, as if waiting for her permission. The widow nodded, her eyes wet, and only then did the children reach out. The younger one grabbed a piece of bread and held it like treasure. The older one carefully scooped stew into a cracked cup and offered it first to the younger sibling. The human watched in silence, moved by their selflessness. They had nothing, yet still they shared. As the children ate, their faces changed. The hollow look of hunger slowly faded, replaced by small smiles, soft giggles, and eyes that brightened with each bite. Their laughter echoed in the shelter, fragile but alive. The human sat quietly, listening, letting the sound sink into his soul. The widow's hands trembled as she picked up her own bowl. She ate slowly, almost shyly, as if she did not deserve the food. The human noticed and shook his head. "You need strength too," he said firmly. She froze, then nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks as she continued to eat. For the first time in years, the widow and her children shared a meal without fear of it running out. For the first time, they were not looking at an empty bowl but at plates that carried hope. The human broke a fruit in half and handed it to the younger child. Juice dripped down the child's chin as they bit into it, laughing with delight. The older sibling smiled, wiping it with the corner of their sleeve. The human felt warmth spread through his chest. It was not just food he had given. It was dignity, it was comfort, it was family. The widow looked across the table at him. Her eyes glowed softly in the lamplight. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. Her voice was filled with both gratitude and fear. "No one has ever sat with us like this. No one has ever treated us as if we mattered." The human shook his head. "You do matter," he said. "You and your children. You deserve more than this." The widow lowered, her gaze, silent tears falling onto her lap. She had begged so many times, been pushed away, mocked, humiliated. Yet now here sat a human, someone who owed her nothing, giving her family not just food, but respect. The children began to talk between bites, their voices soft but growing stronger. They told the human little stories, how they used to chase each other before their father died, how they dreamed of having a home with a door that closed against the cold. The human listened carefully, every word cutting deeper into his heart. By the end of the meal, the bowls were empty, but no one felt the despair of hunger. Instead, the shelter was filled with something new, belonging. The widow leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Her children sat close to the human, leaning against him as if they had known him forever. The human looked around at the broken walls, the leaking roof, and the simple table. And yet, in that moment, it felt more like home than any place he had ever been. As the lamplight flickered, the human realized that this meal had changed everything. He was no longer just a visitor in their lives, he was becoming part of their story. And though he had not spoken the words yet, in his heart he knew. This was only the first of many meals they would share together as something close to a family. The next morning the human walked through the market again, but this time he was not alone. The widow walked beside him with her hood pulled low, and her 2 children held his hands tightly. Their small faces looked brighter after the meal, but their steps were careful, as if they knew eyes were watching and eyes were watching. Everywhere the human turned, he felt the weight of stares. Merchants paused in their shouting. Buyers whispered behind their hands. Some sneered openly. Others shook their heads as if the sight of a human with alien children was an insult. "He thinks he is their father," one voice muttered. "What foolishness," another said. "He should go back to his own kind." A group of young aliens laughed loudly, pointing at the widow. "Beggar woman found herself a pet human," they mocked. The words cut like knives, but the widow lowered her gaze and stayed silent. She had heard such cruelty before. But this time it was worse because the human now stood beside her. The children clung tighter to him. Sensing the hostility in the air, the human's jaw tightened. He wanted to shout at them, to demand they show respect, but he knew it would only draw more hate. Still, he could not hide the anger in his eyes, and that alone made some step back. By the afternoon, whispers had spread across the city. In the taverns, in the alleys, even in the council halls, people spoke of the strange human who fed a widow and her children. Some said he was a fool. Others said he had hidden motives. A few claimed it was part of some human trick to gain power. The human heard these whispers, but what struck him most was the way even children pointed at the widow's family, repeating the cruel words of their parents. It showed him how deeply the judgment of society had already poisoned the young. That evening, as the sun dipped low, the human and the widow sat outside her shelter. The children played with small stones, making patterns on the dirt floor. The widow's face was troubled. Her voice shook when she spoke. "They will not forgive this. They see me as a shame, already. And now they see you as worse. By helping us, you have made yourself a target." The human leaned back, his eyes on the fading sky. "I have been judged before," he said quietly. "On Earth, on other worlds, always for being human. Always for being different, I have learned not to bend under judgment." The widow looked at him with wide eyes. Her hands trembled. "But this city is crueler than you know," she whispered. "They will not just talk. They may act. They may try to take my children from me, or worse." Her words filled the air. With a cold silence, the human looked at the children. Their innocent laughter rang softly as they played. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. He realized then that the judgment of the city was not just words. It was a storm gathering, a storm that could destroy the fragile peace he had found with them. Later, when he walked back through the streets, he noticed the crowd parting around, him not with respect but with suspicion. He saw fingers pointing, heard harsh whispers, felt the burning stare of hatred. It was as if the whole city had turned him into a symbol of defiance. And yet, as the children ran up to him and wrapped their arms around his waist, he knew something stronger than fear was holding him there. Their eyes still looked at him with trust. Their small voices still called him protector. The human clenched his fists. His heart whispered a promise. No matter the city's judgment, no matter the cruelty of strangers. He would not abandon the widow and her children. Even if the whole world turned against him, he would stand with them. The night deepened, shadows gathered at the edges of the city, and whispers turned into plans. Somewhere in the dark, those who hated the widow and despised the human were preparing their next move. The city's judgment was no longer just in words. It was about to become action.